Hello everyone and welcome back to the Bear Bard Tales. It is I, your fuzzy host who never fails to use conditioner after shampooing, the Bear Bard. How you doing today? I missed you. I hope you've been out there living that bard life. I'm glad you're stopping by. Just makes my day that much better. I have a couple stories for you straight from the depths of Reddit, but first, if you enjoy this content, make sure to give this video a like. And honestly, I just couldn't bear the thought of you not being subbed, so make sure you get that taken care of at the same time. Every sub I get gets me one step closer to being loved by Mr. Drake himself. Today's first story is a little different, as it's actually a Discord conversation between mostly 2 people, but 6 get involved. So for those watching, I'll have it all on screen. But for those listening, I will try to do my best for you to be able to tell the difference between the characters in the story. Our first story is titled, Rude D&D Hater Comes into Open D&D Server. Writes this in the main channel. I don't know why I expected anything good. Everywhere I look, all D&D. No good games, just D&D. Well, it's a small server, and a few of us have other systems we want to run. Betting right now one of those is Pathfinder/Starfinder. Do you have some suggestions? Many. Blades in the Dark? You heard of it? I have. Hasn't particularly caught my interest. Right. What does pique your interest? I can give you a top 5 systems. Sure. In no particular order. GURPS, Shadowrun, WOD, but mostly MTA and VTM. Deadlands and the FFG40K stuff can be neat. You ever heard of Savage Worlds? I've played WOD, I just haven't got the books to run with it. Do you have any of those? Responding to the Savage Worlds, I irrationally hate it because it killed classic Deadlands and the old Deadlands timeline. It's just not quite the same when WW1 didn't go nuclear. Do you DM? Sometimes. I'm hesitant to run for randos though, and also GM. It doesn't matter. LMAO. And cool, well, if you stick around and voice chat, I'm sure you could find some people in here to run a game for. It does matter because DM is exclusively used for D&D, and it kinda shows a sign of being inexperienced. Wow emoji. Okay, I don't care that much as it determines the same thing. Anyone that says I'm DMing, I kinda take as a red flag TBH. Or the fact that it's turned into a generic term and not being over pedantic about the term. I think you're a red flag as a player or a DM/GM. Okay. Shows a lack of maturity. Bye, Felicia. Okay, I'm not gonna stop yelling at people for it, but okay. Okay. Annie? Anyway, if I were to run anything here, it would probably be Delta Green, just because I've wanted to for a while. Also, it would be fun since kinda the polar opposite of D&D in a lot of ways. It would be great to have some different systems to being run. Okay, if you want to grab the DM role and set up a time and put it in Open Games Update, there is a format for laying it out. That may also end up being an issue because, there is no way in hell I'm running Delta Green for kids. Kids? Join voice chat and you'll realize that most of us are adults. Like, I don't know how this server is going to react to strict 18+. You assume something that is incorrect. That's fine as long as it gets in the title. Because especially since I'm running Delta Green in 69. I hope you were able to follow along with that because, damn. I mean, let's start off with the fact that if you hate D&D, then maybe you should stay off a freaking server with D&D in the title. There are so many servers and forums out there for different TTRPGs that you should be able to find one of them and not bother a D&D focused server. Then, you luckily got into a server with people who were down to try their games, but you just had to go all vegan hipster with it and act superior just because you don't play D&D. Just because you don't do the popular thing doesn't inherently make you any better than others. Just means you play something different. And if you act like this guy, it just makes you a dick. Sorry, OP, give him the golden boot and be done with it. I feel like there's a whole lot of red flags in there already anyway. Our second story is titled, DM and evil player insist that trying to kill a player is not PvP. Background. When this campaign began, Our group had been playing TTRPGs for about 6 years. We had mostly played different versions of Fate up until a year before this campaign, where we began to dabble in D&D 5e. We had a few good boundary issues occur in the past campaigns, but nothing on this scale. This campaign was the first time our main DM was running a 5e campaign, a high fantasy setting which included firearms. The cast, names altered for privacy. DM, the DM of our campaign. John, mostly a bystander in this story, played a high-energy neutral kobold monk. John, new player to our group, but had played TTRPGs before. Supposedly played a lawful neutral sorcerer. Tony, new to TTRPGs and our group in general. Neutral gnome fighter. Noah, playing a Goliath barbarian who tried to increase his glory by performing good and heroic deeds. Me, playing a neutral good mastermind rogue with high perception and investigation as a detective character. We'd been playing our first D&D campaign with the main DM for a few months at this point. We'd been playing as a group of refugee mercenaries who were on the losing side of a war and took odd jobs for pay while waiting to strike back at the demons who had made us homeless. Up until this point, this campaign had already become notably infamous for the following reasons. There were several occurrences of PvP between Jacob's character and my own. We were transitioning a new player out of murder hoboism. The DM killed John's first character by fiat in the first session. My character was instantly killed from full hit points as a level 6 rogue. A player permanently quit partways through. However, none of this compared to what would become our most infamous RPG horror story. Our party got a contract to repay a huge amount of debt by finding out what had been happening to a village with a history of recent missing persons and curses. What ensued was some of the most interesting gameplay in the campaign, engaging in town politics, investigation, tracking, and a few shifty merchants. Ultimately, we discovered the source of the problem was a coven of hags. Tracking them down was going to be difficult though, as they could shapeshift into and mimic the villagers and were hard to pin down if we approached them straight on. We had a few different areas of the village we needed to watch simultaneously, so we temporarily split the party to watch different sections of the village. Tony and I in one group, Jacob and John in another, and Noah as a lone wolf. This is when disaster struck. What? Splitting the party ended up in bad things? That's crazy. Tony and I were able to sneak up on one of the hags and track them down to their lair, acquiring a few magic items in the process. But the other groups managed to cause such a clusterfuck that any gains seemed like footnotes in comparison. Recently, Jacob's character had his leadership role usurped through a group vote after abusing his role in previous arcs, and the responsibility was handed to Noah's Goliath. The barbarian was a lovable doof, but not the best at critical thinking. While keeping a lookout for hags, Noah's character overheard a conversation in a nearby house with someone who sounded like my character, but many times dumber. He correctly deduced that the fake version of me was the hag, charged into the house and slew a lone figure inside, only to find out that the hags could turn invisible, and he had slain an innocent villager. This quickly escalated when the dead NPC's family returned home immediately afterwards and found him drenched in the blood of their loved one, and an angry mob began to form. Jacob and John, who were close enough to notice the angry crowd, quickly investigated to find Noah barricading himself indoors, trying not to get overwhelmed by angry villagers. Noah asked Jacob if he could help explain things to the villagers and help smooth things over diplomatically, being a character with lots of charisma and having the literal power to influence people's minds. Sure enough, Jacob's character did go out to the crowd, but not with pleading words of forgiveness or solemn words of restitution. He turned his finger back to Noah and asked the villagers to help him kill Noah's character, as he was a dangerous criminal who was a danger to all of them. DM asked for a persuasion check, natural 20. Noah's Goliath is set upon by 100 angry villagers, while Jacob sneers smugly from behind his enraged mob. As if in perfect sync, Noah and his barbarian both rage. Revenge is the only thing Noah wants. He charges Jacob's character, cutting down a score of villagers in his way before he is pushed back by the Action Academy and Jacob's spells. I can only watch in horror as my character is miles away at this point, stunned that the DM is allowing this to happen. Noah has his character run into the woods, badly wounded and a lot of his resources spent. We close out the session watching Jacob describe how he hunts down Noah's bleeding character, puts him to sleep, and then kills him with guaranteed crits, before claiming the blood sigil of leadership he craved so badly. As you can imagine, the post-session is filled with a lot of anger and frustration from Noah and myself. Even John and Tony, who had tried really hard to not rock the boat with Jacob up until this point, were starting to distance themselves. The thing that made this event sting the most was the insistence by both Jacob and the DM that the whole thing had been a great success. Both were adamant that it was a great RP session, and no one would be upset by it because it was all in character, even if someone was very blatantly killed by a power play. DM even had the gall to claim that Noah's death was really his own fault because Jacob never directly attacked him before he started killing innocent villagers, and only acted against him socially inside the game. This was so laughably false to the rest of us that we now have a running gag: social PvP doesn't exist. To this day, it is the most jacked up RPG session that I've ever had the horror of being a part of. Unfortunately, it was only a small part of the train wreck that was this RPG. Your power will be mine. So with this one, I'm actually going to give a quick little side note. Sometimes what can work really well in a story does not work well in a TTRPG narrative. This is the perfect example. The idea of someone turning on a fellow teammate to usurp power and change the dynamic of the group could be a great plot point in a book, movie, or video game. But in a TTRPG group, where the character is an avatar for a person, it doesn't work well. People try to act like good story is good story regardless of the medium. But that's so far from reality. While yes, certain aspects of stories will be pliable across mediums, each medium comes with its own set of challenges and difficulties. Remember what you're writing for when putting together your narrative. With that out of the way, come on dude, you really gonna go out here and turn on your team just so you can be leader? Get over yourself. If you want to lead, then work on your leadership qualities. When you lead without telling others you're leading, that's when you truly become a leader. Now, honestly, there are groups out there that would probably dig this, but you need to discuss this type of playstyle in a session 0. Everyone needs to go into this okay with this kind of thing. If everyone goes in saying, yeah, it'll be sunshine and rainbows, then halfway through it turns into Game of Thrones, you're gonna have problems. It sounds like this was just part of a long line of crappy moments from a campaign. And now that I said that line, this campaign really does kind of feel like Game of Thrones. Probably with an equally disappointing ending. Although I still stand by the cinematography in that last season, it was phenomenal. Remember folks, no D&D is better than bad D&D. No D&D leads to you searching for a good group to play with. Bad D&D leads you to quitting the hobby. I'm sure I can keep going with this story, but I think the point's been made. So let's go ahead and get to this week's Bearfact. Brown bears use tools. Surprisingly, bears have been observed using rocks as tools. Brown bears in particular use rough rocks to scratch themselves with. This alone places bears among the smartest mammals alive today. Let's see those other bears play music. And I think that's where I'm going to go ahead and call it a day. I hope you enjoyed these stories today. If you did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more from this channel. If you're looking for more Bearboard outside of YouTube, then make sure to check me out on Discord, Reddit, Facebook, and Twitter. Also, if you're into podcasts, then make sure to check out the Bearboard Tales podcast, available on all major distributors. For now, the podcast consists of stories from YouTube, just stripped of commentary. But soon here, I will be bringing in more traditional podcasts with guests from all over the place. Some you may even recognize from here on YouTube, so stay tuned for that. But for now, this has been the Bear Bard. Stay kind, stay beautiful, and keep living that bard life.